Hello, intuitive viewers, and welcome. Welcome to Let's Chat on Sunday. And today we are chatting with Jason Tempinski. And I kind of want to introduce you to Jason and let you know who Jason is. And he can tell us too. But Jason is a psychic medium, an expert lifetime regressionist, and works in quantum healing. A practitioner, a psychic, soul, body wellness, and spiritual counselor, channel, and an empath. So many abilities and gifts there, Jason. So he's also the host of the YouTube channel, Discover Your Light. So please welcome Jason, and welcome, Jason, to the channel.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
So
Thank you for having me. Mm-hmm.
That's great. So we kind of came together through Kevin, the healing medium. And you've been on with him, right, on his channel?
Yeah, I've been on with him. We've done, it was interviews in the beginning, and then we started doing, I do online workshops, hypnosis workshops, and he kind of co-hosted those, and then it became clear that he was tapping into what people would experience during hypnosis. So it turned into more of a combination of like hypnosis and spiritual guidance, and also just he was being able, we do a future life regression, and he was seeing what some people were seeing. So it was natural progression. So we've been doing that, and we've just started doing just free readings, which is when he originally reached out to me. He said, before I see us doing readings together. At that time I thought, really? So.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. Amazing. It's interesting how these things are formed, right? These partnerships and how you can tell there's a lot of work on the other side going on to make these partnerships and these collaborations happen.
Right. It's interesting. I mean, even as a practitioner, I wasn't fully aware of, I didn't fully accept my abilities until I started that work, and hearing enough clients learning about their own. So I know that with higher selves and spirit and my own team kind of saying, hey, this is for you too. So yeah, it's been a slow progression. I seem to be matching my voice, or
yeah, you're completely off.
Let me try
you can go out and come back in again if you want. Yeah, as I say, go out and come back in, and we'll see if that helps.
Okay, yeah, I'll be right back. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, go ahead. And we'll just wait for Jason to come back. But you guys, we're going to kind of talk about quantum healing today, and a little bit about how quantum healing and past life regressions may be playing a part in pushing us towards the new earth and pushing us into the fifth dimension. And we can talk about what that is, or what we believe it is, or what I believe it is, and then Jason give his take on it. But I think it should be very enlightening, because I think people have different ideas of what the fifth dimension is, and how it can, and how we jump into it, But there he is. Now we'll go back into our conversation. Hello.
There.
Now you're synced up. Well,
okay.
Good. Perfect. So, well, Jason, tell us first how you where your spiritual journey began. Were you always spiritual? How did you find, quantum healing, and how did you arrive here? Where did this begin?
I guess, I grew up in a spiritual family, so it really wasn't particularly anything that was new to me. So my grandmother was sensitive. My mom is a healer now. She always encouraged me. I think had more faith in what I could do than I did. So I grew up with it, so it wasn't something that was really serious to me. And then I got my grandfather. We got into philosophy, so we would have a lot of deep talks.
So Jason, you're cutting out a little bit. So can you move your, I don't know if it's your microphone or move something towards you so I can hear you better. I'm like, I need to hear what you're saying. Okay.
Let me try that. Is that better?
Yeah, someone's saying you're buffering, but I don't think so. I think it's just your sound. And people want to hear what you're saying because they're very interested in what you're saying.
Why?
I know why.
Let's see.
And yeah, I guess you are buffering a little bit. Yeah, I don't know what this is, but it's technology, people, so we'll have to work with it, but it's, it is what it is.
I think I know what it is.
Oh, okay. And that's, that's the thing with the light. We're at 111 right now, which is very interesting.
Oh, wow.
111, right? So maybe angels are interfering.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I'll just keep talking until you're ready. So. No, it's totally fine. People are used to, luckily everything is done this way now. So everybody's used to the glitches that can happen and the crazy stuff that can happen. And going live is always you're throwing yourself out there without a net in a way. So, but that's okay. And guys, thanks for holding on and hanging out with us today. We do want to get to also questions from you guys and also hearing about your own, this is later, so don't put them up now, but hearing about your own experiences with quantum healing or with past life regressions, even if you've done them on your own, things that may have come out and maybe things that have changed your views or your beliefs, because I definitely had one of those experiences, which I'm going to talk to Jason about. And I have talked a little bit about it with the club, or, a little bit more, I think, about it with the club, but I think I have mentioned it on the channel, my own kind of experience with quantum healing and how it rocked my foundation a little bit. So we'll have to talk about that and when you're actually ready to do it, because I think that is another thing that sometimes I don't think you're prepared for is the information that may come out and how it may inform or back up and sometimes change your views about what it is. So
okay,
great, you're back. So I can hear you now and everything's good.
All right.
Okay, so your own spiritual journey, that's where we were going with this.
Yeah, so it was
I can hear you perfectly. Great.
Awesome. I really don't know what was going on. So yeah, my grandfather was into philosophy, and I thought I was, we used to have some deep conversations, and then I thought I was going to go into college for communications, and I had to take a philosophy class for, just elective, and I just fell in love with it, and I couldn't explain it, and I couldn't stop, and it turned into my major. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. Anyway, but then, it was a point in my life when I thought I knew a lot, but it didn't really, I didn't realize until later on that I really didn't understand a lot of the concepts. So I had careers in between. I worked in restaurants and Napa, and then I became a high school teacher, which was a great experience. yeah, it wasn't quite what I expected teaching to be, but there was an element of I really liked, I actually taught English, and then I started teaching philosophy. So it was always kind of the spiritual bent a little bit.
Right.
So then I decided to get into counseling, and I was studying mental health counseling, clinical mental health counseling. I was in grad school, and it got more and more just frustrating for me. And because spirituality isn't really talked about, and I really wanted to find a way to integrate spirituality into counseling without it being like I'm trying to convert you or anything like that. And I came across Dolores Cannon, and it just was like almost like a, I don't know, download of everything I've ever wondered about, things I talked about with my grandfather when I was a kid, and all my curiosities, and extraterrestrials and my experience with that when I was a kid. And so it was just like, it was almost like it was the answers to all the questions I've ever wondered. And so the more I was studying counseling and more I was learning about, there's so much more to what we diagnose people with and everything else, that I felt like I couldn't continue forward. And so I came across Dolores's classes, and it took me a long time to listen to my team, just to jump in. And so, essentially there hasn't been an exact starting point of my spiritual journey. It's just kind of, I feel like, been in my blood. And then I've gotten validations just through sessions with clients about, from their higher selves and guides, that little snippets of, this already, or you have these abilities, or kind of like teasing me a little bit. So it's been a process, and I think it's just because I tend to be the more analytical, logical, but I am also artistic, so I already have that kind of fighting in my head. So that's kind of the longer short version.
Well, it's interesting because a philosophy major, I think of, and it just may be my own just view of philosophy majors that I've known or that I know of, is that they do tend to be very analytical. They do tend to be very content driven and very just like to add on layers upon layers upon layers. So how did you did you have your own experience with past life regression or quantum healing? Or how did you break out of that and kind of start having your own experiences and trusting them?
I guess it was just, I kind of feel like I took the back door in a little bit, because like I never thought that I would be doing hypnosis ever. Because it was one of those things that I knew it was possible, and it wasn't really anything that I was interested in doing or curious about. So, and I will say, when I was a child, we lived in Las Vegas outside of Area 51. And so I was very aware of aliens and such, or extraterrestrials. And I had an uncle that used to send me hypnosis books, ironically, of people being regressed to alien abductions and alien hybrid children. And I didn't sleep very much.
That would be disturbing.
So if anything, hypnosis was kind of like a trauma for me. But just the process of learning, that QHHT is different, and that you're able to separate clients from their emotions, and they can look at it objectively and see the bigger picture, and that those horror stories are just reactionary and not really understanding what's going on and things like that.
Right.
So it really kind of brought me back to almost like I don't know. It was like I felt like I had built up this fear that really didn't exist, and I'm not scared of that anymore. So I just, my goal is healing, and I just know that I've always been looking for something to do that, I would see people that would say, I love my job. There's nothing I hate about it. And I would just, in the past, would always be like, are you sure?
That's weird.
There has to be something. And I can honestly say that this is like, it just, in retrospect, all the careers I've had and degrees I've gotten, there's little pieces of each. And I've even had my higher self say, doing the counseling program wasn't a waste. You needed to know the language, and you needed to know what people you saw who have been in traditional counseling, be able to understand the lingo. So if anything, that was a little bit of relief for me, just because it was such a process of, I'm not a quitter, I guess. So yeah.
How did you come across Dolores Cannon? How did you come across her?
It was because I really wanted, because I always gravitated, like in grad school, to group counseling, because I think that's much like the collective energy feeling is much stronger than versus an individual, just because there's more dimensions to commonalities and understanding each other and everything else. So I was looking for, I guess, more of a collective, universal, conscious, aware type of counseling, and I came across that a mention about Dolores and how, and it was an article, a scholarly article that was mentioning how she had developed this kind of innovative form of hypnosis that was therapeutic and dealt with extraterrestrials and lifetimes and everything else. And it was just kind of like and admittedly, the first book I got was Custodians, which is about extraterrestrials. And I only got it because I thought, oh, this would be kind of fun to read off when I'm not in school and having done tons of projects to do. And it sat in my Audible for months. And when I listened to it, that began it was an obsession, but it was just like, I couldn't stop getting enough. So, yeah, it's been an interesting journey, one that I didn't expect it, but.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. You talk about how, and I've been told the same thing from my own guides, that no experience is wasted. It's always leading somewhere else. And you even though you can't see it, you don't necessarily know, but whether it's a good experience or a bad experience, a long experience, a job experience, it's never wasted. And I can see how, because I've been a musician, I've been a teacher, and like that was my long career of musician or singer, about 25 years, long career of teaching preschool, about 15, 16, 17. And then this does use all of those skills. And I think that sometimes too, we get hung up on what's our one thing. What's that one thing we're supposed to do here? And I don't think that anymore. I think it's a myriad of things. And, and those things all lead you to the next thing or the next things. Do you have that opinion now that you're kind of where you are now and kind of where you started? And
yeah, I mean, if anything, the funny thing is that, just that realization, it, helps me work with people, because, I would kind of think I'm so random, or I would tell people, I've done all these different careers, and it just seems like completely different lifetimes for me, so to speak, looking back. And I think that is more common than not, that, people change careers and change their minds all the time, but there's a certain level of, peace that they find in just having someone validate for them, I understand that I did this, I did that, I did this, and now I'm doing this, and now it all makes sense. So just having the trust and the patience and the faith that even if it's temporary, it's still important, and it still contributes to where you're supposed to be in the future.
Right. Absolutely. And as you're talking, I'm like, I have all these questions, like little questions pop up. But I wanted to ask you about, well, first let me tell you that I had my own past life regression, and I did it with Dave Johnson, he's an Australian cat.
I've heard the name, yes.
Yeah, he's wonderful, and he was so great, but he kind of talked me into it. I was very hesitant, and it's weird because I think of myself as so open-minded and so liberally minded, but I was kind of like, I don't know. And he's like, I think yours would be fascinating. I really want to do it. So let me know when you want to do this. And so finally I was like, okay, I relented, and we did and I have to say that there were things in it, and it has to do with Dolores Cannon. So I wanted to get your opinion on this, but it had to do, it really was I would say literally, but not literally, but it was a mind-blowing experience, because I don't know if, I mean, clearly I was prepared to hear it. Otherwise it wouldn't have come through, but it did like change my views on things. And one thing was that with Dolores Cannon, I remember watching a video with her talking about the past life, or the lifetime process, or the reincarnation process. And she was saying that we have a chance to be everything: a rock, a tree, this, that. And when I was watching it, I was like, no, I don't think that's right. So this doesn't resonate with me at all. And then in my regression, I still get chills when I talk about it, because it was the weirdest, but also the most like enlightening thing. There was this point where I had this memory, this in-between life memory of blending with the energy of a star, like a star in the sky, blending with that energy and feeling that energy of being with the star in the sky. And I did it so long that my guides came to me and said, you need to move on from this. You need to stop being a star, because you've learned all you can, and you need to move on, that kind of thing. And I was laughing about it in the regression. I was like, oh my God, they're telling me to move on and stop doing this. And they're laughing with me, but kind of like pushing me gently to move on from this. And then I had the same thing with a flower, that I blended with the energy of a flower, and I kind of got stuck. And they were like, stop being a flower. You got to move on. It's, we know this is fun and interesting, and it feels good, but you need to move on from this. And when I came out of it, I was like, that is what she's talking about. It's not so much we are the rock, we are the tree. It's that we blend our energy with it to fully understand it. And that's what was going on. And so it was, and it also lended validity to the process, because nowhere in myself, in my Kim self, in this identity, was I remotely thinking that's a possibility. I was just like, I rejected it wholeheartedly. But then it came in a way I could fully understand it and embrace it and realize, oh, that's what that is. I get it now. So what do you make of that, Jason?
I will be honest that even though I went, through the classes and all that, I mean, I'm the same kind of like spiritual skeptic. Like I have to
me too.
See it firsthand, experience it firsthand, even though I know it wouldn't be like that. But it wasn't until even after the classes that I had my first session with, it was a friend of mine, and he really wasn't into it. He was just like, yeah, whatever, I'll try it. And I was like, okay, great. And the thing was that it was like, I didn't know until after the fact, but he went in a trance within like 5 seconds. He had this full-on lifetime. He was a blacksmith. It was this like whole, like, it almost seemed like a movie where he had stolen this preacher's ring in order to pay for his family to get away from yellow fever in Virginia. And it was just like stuff that could never, ever, ever be made up. And then his higher self came through and did healing and stuff. And then I brought him out of it. And I really wasn't sure. I just thought, was he, there's still the doubt. And I asked him, I said, how long do you think you were out? And he was like, I just closed my eyes like a second ago. So he remembered absolutely nothing, which is actually
really? So he was fully in a trance. He was fully there. Yeah.
So I mean, that was even a big thing for me. And then, I knew about the rocks and I knew about the flowers and stuff. And it made sense to me. I mean, in the bigger picture. But I was curious if I would ever have that happen. And I actually recently had a client who was like a rock. And it was weird because it was just this matter of, typically you try to get people to, get a sense of their body, what they're wearing and everything else. And I was trying the usual questions and just nothing was computing with him. And he was like, I don't know. I just see these, these really big flowers above my head. So then I was thinking, well, maybe this is another planet. And he said, the grass is really tall. Then he could see like a tree in the distance. And I was confused a little bit. I mean, I'm pretty used to, and I kind of have I can kind of visualize, I do kind of tap into what people are seeing.
Right.
And I could see the scene and I could see what was going on, but it was just there. Anyway, so I was like, so, what do you do? How do you spend your days? Do you have a job? I was just trying to move forward. And he was like, I don't really feel like I move anywhere. And I said, okay. And then I had him I said, what about, the sky? Do you see anything in the sky? And he was like, actually, everything's going, like he said, I'm seeing all the seasons go by and really fast forward. And I said, well, what does that mean to you? And he was like, I think I've just been here a really long time. So then I finally had him step outside himself. And like you, the conscious mind kind of came in and he paused and he said, I think I'm a rock. And I said, okay. And he was like, I don't believe it, but I'm, well, like you said, it's kind of the energy. I spent my time here as a rock and I didn't
because you're still you. You're still your own consciousness, but you're just kind of merged into this this experience. Yeah.
So it was interesting because just like in Dolores's, because she had the rock in one of her books, I moved him past when he was a rock and I had him look back at the lifetime and I said, looking back on this lifetime, because he didn't really die, he just knew it was time to go. What was the message and what was the lesson? And he said it was stillness and patience. So it was, and I just got chills just saying that. So it was, and the thing is he was shown that because he in this lifetime was really impatient and he didn't trust that things would happen. And so when I asked his higher self, it's like, why did you show him the lifetime of the rock? And they said, because he needed this. He needed to understand the patience and the stillness. And now he remembers what that's like and how to use it. So yeah, it's not unheard of. And it's always what people need to see. It's part of the healing. And
that was going to be my next question. Is it always related to this? Do you find that it's always somehow related to this life? Because that was my experience. That it was. Yeah.
I mean, it's very intentional, and people develop questions. I mean, ultimately, it's their higher selves nudging them to do it, even though they might be resistant. Particular practitioners they meet with, that's usually planned, and the intention of, and it's actually part of the hypnotic process, is making sure that it's understood that this lifetime is always the most important of all, and accessing other lifetimes is for the sole purpose of learning and getting information for this lifetime. So I've discovered even if people see regressionists or are, possibly have experiences where they see past lifetimes, there is still an intentional reason why they see them, even if it's like in a dream. It's just a matter of having someone there, like a practitioner, to really help to decipher and understand it. So, yeah.
And it is like having a guide, because you kind of, you especially if you, I've done them on my own, and sometimes you get stuck. Like it's almost like you can't move from a certain, something that you're seeing or something, and you kind of can't move out of it. I think the practitioner is one of their purposes is to keep it moving,
right?
So that you can get the most out of it, and so you can kind of move on from scenes, right?
Yeah, because there are, like, it very similar to what you were explaining with the star. You didn't want to leave, and there are some people that will go direct. I've had people, including myself, in my experience, they don't see a lifetime, and they go into energy, and they see color, and they see light, and they feel the universal love. And some people get really emotional, and they're like, forgot what this is like. I don't want to leave. And it's like, kind of like, okay, we have to come back. And some people fight. They're like, I don't want to leave. It's just so beautiful here. I'm home. So definitely that's kind of the positive side, but then there's also being burned at the stake, and being in that type of moment. And with QHHT, you are experiencing life in real time. It's happening as, because there's really no past or future. Everything's happening right now. So just being caught in the moment of burning, there really isn't an awareness of, I can take myself out of this because it's happening. So that's kind of where we step in and say, you can watch as an observer. You don't have to experience this. What are you seeing? So, yeah, it's definitely helpful to have someone guiding you, at least for the first time, just to kind of feel what it's like.
It's a deep experience, because I know that, well, first of all, right after I was done, I know you're supposed to go, at least with Dave, you're supposed to like watch it fully, completely through, that kind of thing. And I needed a couple of days. I was just like, what just happened? What just happened? I don't fully understand this, but it felt like when I was in the process, it almost felt like I was in the back seat and listening. I wasn't really, I didn't feel like the one talking. I didn't feel like the one, but I could hear everything and I was listening. And then at the end, when they did the countdown, like to come out of it, I felt like my soul was coming back into my body. It was the weirdest sensation, I have to say. And so afterwards, I was kind of like, what in the world just happened? One weird thing that I did not expect, because I know that people will recognize other people in their life now by, they'll recognize, oh, my grandfather is my son in this life, and that kind of thing. And I was just like, that probably won't happen to me. I don't know why I thought that, but I did. But I had a lifetime with a grandmother, and we're sitting across the table from each other. And he's like, look into her eyes, and who do you recognize this person? And it was my daughter. I just knew, right, like that. And it was very interesting, because in that life, I was, younger. I was the granddaughter, clearly. And so she passed away, and I couldn't handle being away from her. I kind of unraveled a little bit. And in this lifetime, it's very interesting, because my daughter has been, even through COVID, she's been in the UK, living in the UK. And so again, we're kind of going through this, it's just a period of separation, but it's a different kind, where I thought maybe it's more of a baby step, because I unraveled in the other one, and I almost unraveled during COVID, but I didn't. Yeah. And it's been a much easier process. And so, but it was very related to this lifetime, for sure. But when do you think people are prepared to do something like this? What would be a cue that you might be ready for something like this?
It's ultimately,
is it just curiosity, or is it more than that?
I don't think that I think that just it. I mean, the first session I had with my friend is an example. So it was like he didn't even have questions. It was just, I'm your test subject, guinea pig. And he's had a really profound experience. So it's almost like, I feel like sometimes the less you expect from the experience is when you get more, which is kind of how spirit works anyway. The more that you want something, and then when you finally kind of surrender and forget about it, that's when it comes through. And I think that there isn't any right or wrong time. It's just trusting that nudge, and going with it, and not talking yourself out of it, like, oh, that, I don't even know if that will work, or things like that. Because the truth of the matter is, we're all hypnotized all the time, most of the time. Just watching the show right now is a form of hypnosis, because you're blocking out things, you're not paying attention to other things. So it's also, I feel like, a big responsibility of, at least what I see, is just helping people to understand that hypnosis isn't some, mysterious voodoo thing. It's we experience it all the time. It's television shows, movies, listening to music, driving and missing a turn. I mean, that's all examples. It's just we don't see it that way. So I just just such a I just feel like that it's a healing that isn't anything new. It's ancient. It's just that it has a new name. But shamanic journeying and other things, I've had a couple clients that do that, and they're like, this is kind of like a form of shamanic journeying in a sense that you're taking someone through lifetimes in order to heal in the present. So it's really an ancient form of healing. It's just given a fancy little name. So
right. And I just wanted to acknowledge that Kevin is in the chat and he says hello. And we actually will get to the chat because I know people want in on this conversation and I want to hear what they have to say about it. One person was saying that, and I think that's a really good way to understand it. Tony was saying that our greater whole soul is like a strand of pearls, with each pearl representing a separate incarnation, part of the whole strand. And I think that's if our whole soul is kind of like the necklace, and then we're putting all these strands of pearls. I think that's a really good analogy, don't you?
Yeah. And it's also, I think, something that's not often discussed and fully understood, but the type of healing that you do in your present lifetime does heal all the other lifetimes. So there's always kind of this personal responsibility to heal yourself in certain ways, because it can relieve, previous traumas, past traumas in ways, and even within like generational, shared generational traumas or things that are passed on from generation to generation. I had a recent client have the realization that she comes from a lineage of anger and resentment and everything else. For the longest time, she thought was just her mother, but it was actually from doing this process, and just by that acknowledgement and being released what she was in process of taking from her mother in terms of anger and resentment. Just doing the healing, her higher self acknowledged that it healed all of her ancestors when she did that, because it released it. So
that generational trauma, ancestral trauma, that is such a great point. And sometimes what I found too in that process is that just seeing it and naming it is all you have to do. Sometimes it's not even, it's just that realization of, oh, that's what that is. And then it just kind of poof, it's gone. It's a really interesting process for sure.
It's just acknowledging that our body is conscious, our spirit team, can intervene, but one of the, most noticeable, pay attention right now type things is to cause, physical symptoms, illness, disease, pains, aches, and just knowing that ideally 100% they always say this is the perfect vehicle. Sometimes they call clients vehicles in the process because we are kind of in a borrowed vehicle now.
Right.
But in the greater scheme of things, they say we're always, it's a perfect body. There should never ever be anything wrong with it. Even in terms of aging, it's just a combination of, we have messages, and understanding the messages in our body. They acknowledge environmental and other toxins we take into our bodies can also produce certain results. But in the bigger scheme of things, we were designed to live hundreds, if not thousands of years. And I've been told that, it's the collective belief system and our own beliefs that result from that, I'm 72, I'm going to be leaving soon. It makes that the case, but they always point to like the Egyptian records and Mayan records, and even in the Bible, the stories of people who lived thousands of years, and they said that actually happened, because it was a different time. Granted, I don't want to go down the route of our concept of what being human and on the earth is very different from what it was back then. So that kind of factors into it too. But it's having gratitude for the physical symptoms that we experience, because they are messages. And you're right, that's kind of what I was getting to. Just the acknowledgement of what that message is, and having gratitude, and then saying, now I understand. I'm going to, move in the best way possible according to this. That's when things heal, no matter what it is.
Right. And I wanted to kind of talk about too this idea of ascension and the new earth, because I think a lot of people are talking about that and sensing that something is shifting, something's happening right now. I mean, just having this conversation and all of the conversations you see on YouTube, and how maybe not completely mainstream, but how accepting a lot of this stuff is becoming, and people are accepting this as like a legitimate type of therapy, and a legitimate, it's gaining a lot of legitimacy, and people are trying to understand it, I think, in a way that maybe they weren't ready for, or weren't quite, there. But it is shifting and changing, and pretty fast, with social media, and with the how we are so connected through electronic devices now. It's really spreading quickly too. So there's an uptick in all of this. So I think everybody feels it. But my understanding of it now, I know Dolores Cannon had a different idea of this, and I don't know that it even matters what the real thing is, but I kind of take the Eckhart Tolle view of a new earth, which is that it's a shift in consciousness. It's a movement in consciousness, and that because of that, you can really choose it at any time to just be there and remain there. It's just there's this push and pull that goes on in like maybe the fourth dimension, where we know and understand who we are, but we're still pulled into the 3D drama all the time of our lives and our problems and our this and that. And so it's moving out of that and into a higher consciousness of, I know who I am, I know where I'm from, I know we're all connected. And this is just an experience that I'm having. And so moving and staying in that is the goal, I guess, and once we're all there, that is the new earth, because everybody, when you live in that, your decisions are different, everything's different. And that's what creates the new earth. Now, Dolores Cannon was like, it's a different place and we're all moving there. So what is your idea of the new earth, and what do you think it is?
It's the funny thing is that I haven't gotten kind of a clear answer until recently. So,
good.
Because I think generally it's been very vague, because I knew even within Dolores's work, I mean, it's not completely transparent not transparent, whatever the explicit what the new earth is and what's happening and everything else. And recently I received it through a session that, and I think, in fact, Sarah Bresnik-Cosme talks about this in one of her books. She's another practitioner that I would recommend her books. They're just fantastic.
Great. Okay.
That it's both. So, so there's two earths here, this is a formation of a new level of frequency and vibration. So there is kind of like this energetic earth that isn't distinct, but still different on this plane. There is also a new physical earth, a new, that has been in process for a long time of being seeded, meaning, providing an environment that would support life. And it's also, there are souls and spirits and energies that have already started going there to help with this process. It's one of the things also is that many of these souls actually, has been explained that COVID, while there was many different aspects of COVID that were necessary for the ascension to happen, a lot of those souls or spirits were actually leaving to go to the new earth, and it was already predetermined that that was the case. So that's only one aspect. I mean, there's many other lessons within the COVID thing, but I've learned this, that any type of like mass loss of groups of people, whether it be a disaster or things like COVID or other things or epidemics or anything like that, is predetermined in an agreement of a collection of souls to come in together and to leave together. And it's for the progression of humanity and spiritual progression of humanity too.
Right. And I got something very similar, especially around COVID, that it was kind of like a message of, we're going to start seeing like groups of people leave, and even groups of animals leave as well. And because it was during the rainforest fires that I got the message, and it was like, you're going to see groups of animals leaving, groups of, but it's all okay, because this was something they agreed to. This was an agreement, and I didn't understand the agreement. Why did they agree to this? But you're filling in that gap right now, which is very interesting. So that's very interesting that it came through. And like I said, I think things come through as we're prepared for them, or as much as we can like handle or understand, because otherwise we'd have no context whatsoever and we'd be completely lost. But
I mean, some of the concepts even are still controversial that I hesitate to bring up. I mean, it's things that come through for me that came through for Dolores, and that's saying that people agreed to die during COVID can be in itself, I mean, especially if it's personal, is more difficult to accept. But I think that it's a matter of perspective and thinking, oh, well, that's even more amazing that they're continuing on and helping with the transition, just on a different plane, different existence.
Right. And we can see all the benefits for humanity that it brought, right? And maybe not every single person got the same thing out of it, or maybe maybe they weren't, they were just happy to be out of it and that was it. But so many people shifted and changed, even on just an earthly level of like, I decided I don't like this job, or I decided I'm missing too much time with my family and I want to stay home now and work. Things like that were very real world, but they were still shifts, right?
Right. I mean, that's another aspect that I've received messages about, that technology didn't come from out of thin air, that there have continually been ways in which certain inspirations and ideas have been introduced through particular now famous people, or not famous, but very pivotal people in the history, and that technology does have a purpose, even though there's a lot of negatives said about it. It is essentially what brought people together, and there's always a continual emphasis on the fact that out of tragedy, out of disasters, out of those types of situations, it brings out the humanity and what really matters in people. So it's a cleansing and a release. And with the COVID, it's showing us that it's the collective global consciousness that we're moving towards as one aspect, that we can still connect in ways that doesn't have to be through the physical. And we do that anyway. We just aren't, there are people who aren't as aware of that.
Right. Yeah, it's happening all the time, whether you realize it or not. It's that realization that I think we're all trying to help people to move towards, and to realize it through your classes. I do classes too, and it's just to help people to see you can do this, and you're doing it all the time. You just don't realize it. And once you realize it, then you can call it in. You can do it more. You can, Exactly. So
Yeah.
let's go into the chat and see what the chat has to say. And I kind of want to see what, if people have had experiences with quantum healing, and if they have any questions as well about the process, or about anything maybe that came through for them that they're not, they weren't prepared for, or they just are curious about.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of clients who have had regressions, but it's more like a field trip. We're like, okay, that was nice. And then there really is anything else, which is really unfortunate, because, that additional guidance and understanding is usually helpful. So
Right. And are you an empath? Because I'm getting that you're an empath, but I didn't read that, or I don't remember seeing it anywhere. But
yeah. And Dolores specifically said not empaths shouldn't do QHHT.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I still struggle, especially because I kind of mentioned before that when people are having lifetimes, that I'm actually there with them and I see what they see. It took me a little while to figure that out, until I actually did a regression with my mom, and it came up at one point that she saw this she saw a little kid pop up at a table where she was sitting at, and it was her child. She didn't really say that much about it. And then when she came out, she was like, yeah, that little kid, he was just so cute. And he had this big wire, frizzy yellow or white hair, and these big blue eyes, and one tooth. And then it hit me. I was like, that's exactly what I was picturing. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I continually need to be aware of getting too connected to people in my life, especially when they're really
a challenge for an empath.
Yeah, but it's manageable.
Well, Gina has the question: is the new Earth that Eckhart Tolle describes the same as the fifth dimensional consciousness? So is it, I guess you said it's kind of both. It is a shift in consciousness, right?
Yeah.
But it's also moving us into literally a new dimension, correct?
Yes.
Or is that kind of right? Maybe I'm wrong.
There are still some vague areas, just in terms of if the vibrational Earth, I guess I'll call it, is entirely a different experience than those people who choose to not engage in it, which is kind of, and from the spiritual perspective, is fine. It's the people that, don't want to participate in spiritual, or don't feel called to do it, and it's not a good or bad decision. But it really hasn't been clear to me. I don't think for anyone as of yet, and I think it's on purpose, but I have had, and I asked recently in a session, because I've had visions of physical, people coming, and it will be a matter of, like, for example, me and other people saying, do you trust me? And so I asked about that during a session when it came up, even though, it's all about clients, but sometimes the conversation goes in ways that I can slip in a question. It wasn't really, they said that you will know when the time comes. So in a way, it was a validation and not. So I guess, I don't know. I think that there's just going to be a lot going on, and there's going to be, I think the 5D is also a matter of that there are going to be new beings coming, and becoming part of the Earth experience. And I think part of the consciousness just is acknowledging that we are galactic beings, we are part of the galactic community, which is going to bring on a whole set of, values and understandings. And so I think the fifth dimension is all about that too. And granted, we're in and out of that all the time. So I think there's just going to be a little bit more stability and consistency, just because our realities will be, it will be hard and difficult to forget, I guess. put it. Still, there's a lot of questions in there, I know.
Exactly. And this is interesting too, because Janet brings up something that I think of too. And she said it's starting to sound like what you're talking about is what the born again Christians mean by the rapture, only less judgmental. But it's interesting because I was thinking is because we have all the time where there are certain aspects of organized religion where I feel like there are certain things they kind of have right, but because it's, how do I say this in a nice way, but it's kind of like it's almost like looking at something like a preschool level and looking at a college level. It's not that the information's necessarily wrong. It's just that there aren't the other layers of understanding to get to like this is the thing. So I think it's not necessarily educational, but it's experiential. Maybe they haven't had these kinds of experiences to kind of layer on top of each other to understand exactly what it's talking about. So it's kind of a very bare bones idea of people just disappear, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Do you think that's what that is? How it
is? I would highly recommend Dolores's book, Jesus and the Essenes. It's a client she had that was not, who was regressed to, it wasn't Jesus, but it was one of Jesus' teachers. And he was in the scene. And it's super interesting in terms of Dolores. It was funny. I'll just say at the end of the book, she was shocked, not so much in what was left out, but just how correct it was. It was just a matter of using, there wasn't a language for certain things back then. And I've even seen that with sessions. Sometimes, galactic councils come through or higher selves try to explain certain concepts or ideas to, a client and me. And then they get really frustrated and they'll say, there isn't a word for us to describe it because it's beyond your comprehension. So if anything, that's kind of a good way to think about it. And what happened in the Bible, largely, it was true and large of it happened. It was just through the lens of a person back then. And it's not saying it's wrong or right. It's just, there's been a lot more galactic involvement in even Christianity. So in essence, you could see this as, a big change. I don't want to use rapture because it's, I feel a heavy word. It's going to be a process where, it's not going to be, you're a bad person, you're a good person, you're being saved, you're not. It's through our own decisions and our own actions and our own free will that we will have a choice of whether, we stay in the cycle that we've been on, or we don't want to do the karma thing anymore, which is obsolete. And they stress there's no good or bad decision. You have free will. So it's not like people who like the ascension. I know some people kind of feel allergic to that word and they always stress that it's not better than or less than. Even with dimensions, a higher dimension doesn't mean that it's better than. And so they always make sure that people understand that too. It's okay to say that you're ascending and it's not a judgment.
Well, and it's also to me, it's just an evolution of spirit. It's not as if it's where we're just evolving to. So I think that sometimes with a thing like the rapture, there's a fear element there. And I never ever get that feeling of like, it's something to be afraid of and you better be on board or you're not getting on. It's not like that. It really is this is just happening, people, and people will come along when they're ready, they're ready. And when they're not, they're not. And but what people that are, I think that what it means is that some people will stay on this very, 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 very hard and very painful cycle of karma, because it is a hard thing to do and to go through. Every life is really hard. And so it's like you said, it is going to be a choice, and it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just something that's happening, and people will go at different rates, right? Or at different speed rates or wherever they are.
Yeah. And it's also, there's going to be different, there is a physical planet. There eventually, will be populations there. How that manifests is, like I said, I've had visions about it. I don't know if it's legitimate or symbolic, but, and then, it's going to be happening on Earth, and everyone's going, there are people here now. A lot of us are here now, that are here to help with that. And it's in different capacities and different roles. Some of us are aware of it. Some of us aren't aware yet. But when the time comes, like I was told, you'll know what to do, because certain things may be suddenly flipped on. Like, oh, I need to teach all these people who haven't dealt with abilities before to help them. Or, oh, I need to lead the expedition to Planet X or whatever else.
Right.
I think what you said about fear is just so important, because that, I hesitate always in sharing information. And, I was on a show the other day and some people were like thinking I was the doom bringer, and it's like, it's not, I'm not here to create fear.
Right.
It's just what's going to happen. And if you choose fear, that's your choice. But ultimately, and even the information I've gotten, they always say, we're telling you this to inform, not to create fear. And so that's the best that I do whenever I talk about things like this. It's like, I'm not predicting the end of the world.
Right. No, exactly. That's exactly right. And so let me ask this question. Can you be spiritually awakened and stay here? And I think that's what you're talking about. If you feel like you have work to do here on old Earth, then you probably will. You'll be that. It's your choice. Right?
Yeah. They've acknowledged that some people will still be, stay behind, and be part of, the continuation of the 3D experience. So, and again, the biggest thing is that just remembering to live in the moment. And so it's not, you don't need to obsess on what you need to do when things come to pass, because it will be a natural progression, because we're all here and it's in our DNA. So just trusting that you'll know which way to go, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's, and like you said, I think that the idea of being in the moment, making conscious choice, not being reactive, to things, not being pulled into drama all the time just for the sake of it, things like that. It's things that are really actually very simple, and mostly where, I find that even, when I am living in a way that is very in line with spirit, I don't want that stuff. I tend to not want to be involved in drama. I tend to not want. So I think it, like you said, it's very natural when you're just kind of moving. Now, granted, I have days I turn on the news and I yell at my TV set. So I am not saying that I am anywhere near ready or perfect. But it's all a process, right?
It's a process. And we have choice. So it's like, if you watch the news, it's not evil, but they always stress that, particularly now, like, there is a particular reaction to the progression that's going on right now. It does kind of have to do with moving into a paradigm and a way of being that the divine feminine is respected and not suppressed. That is coming back. Gaia is coming back. And whether consciously or unconsciously, there are aspects reflected in the political system, in media, that are reflective of the old system that's paying away the control.
Right.
And so some of the legal decisions that have been made as of late that seem to be turning back the wheel of time a little bit has been explained that this is, the last attempts of people who identify more with a particular vibration, latching on to the past and not wanting to let go. They'll be sad to know that it's kind of inevitable.
Right.
To put it nicely, but they just want people to understand that what's being portrayed now is a reaction and not the true essence of what these institutions were meant to represent, is what I've been told. So
right.
It's not to say it isn't entertaining.
Well, that's it. And I think that there has to be, and I'm finding this with my own channel, that I'm trying to strike the balance of being aware and awake and trying to understand what's happening. So you kind of have to have a level of awareness, but at the same time, not necessarily getting sucked into it all the time. And it's a process. It is a process. I love politics and I love all of those discussions and things. So that's part of this incarnation right now. So pulling away from that and kind of trying to see, not necessarily being in the world, but not of it, is kind of where I'm trying to strike that.
Yeah, I understand that. And I think that also recognizing that like polarity is something that's will not really have a certain place in society in the 5D consciousness. So also having that recognition that having to choose a side on something, that's not really making a choice according to spirit and the higher self. It's choosing not to be part of that, but being able to see it for what it is. And as long as you keep that perspective, watch all you want.
Well, and that is keeping in the higher consciousness while you're observing something that's happening. You're not necessarily involved in it.
Right.
I also think that some of these things are going backwards to show us why we need to move forward. It's like reminding us, this is what it was like when it was like this. So this is why we're moving forward. Right.
Yeah. And that's interesting because I had a message come through yesterday that was about sometimes you have to move backwards to go forward. So that's
I think that's very
a really
true.
good example.
I think that's very true. I think we forgot we've had Roe v. Wade be a certain way for a long time, and some of us have forgotten or never lived under a different way. And so they're kind of reminding us, listen, this is why this matters, and this is why we're going forward, and let go of it. Do our pets come with us to the new earth?
I don't know if this from experience, but I just know in terms of, well, I guess it's experience too. Yes.
Yeah, I would say yes too. And it's interesting because they are, I know Eckhart Tolle always says, and I've gotten this in readings before, that they are our reminders here to live in the moment and to live with unconditional love. And I think that's going to be needed on the new earth too. That's going to be where we will be. So I think they will be there, but maybe just in a more knowing form rather than just the know nothings. The little, we're just here.
Yeah, I know that pets choose us. We don't choose them, and they come in at the exact time that we need them. So very much like children choose their parents. that pets have a greater awareness than I think a lot of people give them credit for. I do also know, and I learned this through a session, that pets innately should never be ill or sick. They only reflect back to us what we need to pay attention into in our own bodies, which is interesting.
Oh, that is very interesting.
Because I had a client who wanted to get in contact with her cat. She had a very close relationship, and the cat actually, by virtue of having an illness, radically changed this woman's perspective of work. She needed to be home to take care of the cat, and she developed this loving, unconditional loving bond with the cat. And then she wanted to know from the cat if they would come through a QHHT session, if there was anything that she could have done better, or if there was anything that she needed to know that she didn't pick up on. And the cat said, and it was almost kind of comical. It was, and the cat did come through, the spirit, and said, "No, this wasn't about me. I was only giving you what you needed to see, and my leaving was only for you to, take that forward." And it was pretty powerful in that it was a recognition that the cat saw in the woman what needed to be done and the healing she needed to do, and took on a particular illness that was reflective of what she needed to see. So yes,
Wow.
without a doubt. I've had clients too that have, and Dolores says that people don't go back as animals, but like once we're a human form, we never go backwards. Go backwards. But I've had people who have that really strong bond that ask, there's something more here. And sometimes it's a person, a spirit that you've had a past lifetime with that decides to incarnate as your pet, just to serve as your, undying companion and always being there with you. So it could be someone from a past life too. So it kind of gives validation to those strong, like, I know this dog, but I know I shouldn't know this dog.
I totally believe that. I had my dog Ricky, who I had just a weird bond with, and I would look in his eyes sometimes and just be like, "Who are you? I know you're somebody I should know, but who are you?" And I had this really weird dream one time where I was looking at Ricky's face and I was kind of holding his face in my hands, and it turned into a person. And I was looking, so it was definitely, and in the dream, I didn't recognize the person, but it was a man. And I was like, but it was kind of confirming what I thought. And it kind of was like, it doesn't necessarily matter that you know who this is,
right?
But just know that this is a possibility, that you're here and you're being, this dog is your companion for a definite reason, and that take this gift basically. And so that's very interesting that you say that, because I had that experience with this dog, and when he passed too, I really felt like, will I ever get over this? I don't know if I will.
Yeah, I mean, I think that explains for people, especially when it's like losing a person or it's losing a family member. It's true. In a sense that you are losing someone, so they just have a furrier body, I guess, would be the way to put it.
I mean, exactly. And Jamie Johnson said dogs are so much better than humans. I'm having such a hard time since my dog died Wednesday. Oh, I'm so sorry, Jamie. And Jamie, send me an email and I'll send you an orb of your animal, because that's something I do for free for people that lose pets. And so just I will call him his orb, and you will see that your doggy is just fine. You're just fine. So, yeah. And maybe I should ask you that before we leave, Jason. Where do you know where orbs fit into all this? Because I do orb work all the time. They respond. They come in. They follow commands. They change colors. The weird experiences I've had with orbs, I've had so many at this point. I call in people's pets. I've called in people's family members. They come in. It's always some kind of, way to show that they are who they are.
My understanding is that, we're ultimately light.
Right.
and any sort of manifestation is just the result of their desire to be seen. So I think I don't want to, I'm kind of assuming, I'm not sure if this is correct, but in terms of conservation of energy, it takes a lot to manifest. So I think the orb is one of the more practical.
I think so too. I think that's right.
And it's just a matter of, I want to be seen, I want to be acknowledged, but it would take a lot of energy to appear as, your great grandfather or something. So that's my intuition. I don't know. But and it's also acknowledging that there's many different types of entities that travel that way. I know for a fact that fairies, yes, they do exist. I had a client who was a fairy, also travel that way. So just being open to that as well. Yeah, that always
and you're right. These are all just different energies because, and I've told this to my eyes, but I'll tell you, well, was doing an orb session, and all the orbs were coming in, and I asked, can you show me what a fairy energy looks like? And all of a sudden they got really super teeny tiny and started kind of buzzing around almost like fireflies.
Yeah.
It was the weirdest thing. So it's just a different type of energy. Yeah. Really?
I mean, that client, she had this life, and she said, we sometimes take on the Tinkerbell. Well, she didn't use Tinkerbell, but that form. But in all reality, they're just energy, just as everything is. It's just, when they need to appear a certain way to someone for some reason or another. I mean, she confirmed, she was like, the pictures in the storybooks, that's usually how we appear. So,
right.
It was really cool for me. That was like, oh my God, it's a fairy.
That is real. Yeah, that's what you, And what do you think about I want to ask you real quick before we go, what do you feel like, what do you think our daydreams tell us? Because someone was saying that feeling of being in hypnosis it feels a lot like daydreaming. And it is kind of that same kind of, that surreal, but kind of like, but like you're in that world. So it's real to you right there. So do you think and I know like Brian Weiss always says, like, don't get caught up in what's real and what's not real when you're doing this, just go for it. And do you think the things we daydream about or the things that come to us are we stepping into the in-between when we're daydreaming, do you think?
I do. I mean, I think the understanding that, and this always is kind of shown to me, particularly with manifestation, like when we manifest things, I think kind of the human tendency is to think that something doesn't exist until we actually see it. And it's, to kind of answer your question, it's like once we visualize something, once we have a desire for something, it immediately comes into existence. It's just in a different plane or a different timeline. So it's not so much when people say that, one of the classic things to say now is, act as though it already exists and give gratitude that exists. And for the longest time, I just thought, okay, it doesn't exist yet, but still. But the reality is that thoughts are things, and every time we have a thought, it produces something somewhere, even though we might not have it. So, in essence, giving gratitude for its existence is acknowledging its presence. It's just a matter of making choices and having the belief and consistent belief that it's there, and that's how we kind of get to that timeline. So with daydreams, I think it's the same thing. It's like, it is a reality. It's just, it's somewhere else, and that's where you go for a moment. I mean, you could even say it's a form of astral travel, because a lot of times if we get lost in daydream, someone touches us, it's like the lightning bolt, which actually in hypnosis, if you touch someone who's under hypnosis, it's like it feels like a lightning bolt. So I think that his theory that it's it's a form of hypnosis too. So
yeah. It's that hyper focus, and it's a similar to I'm sure that you know this too. When you read, it's a similar feeling when you read. There is a dreamlike quality to it. You're just in this. I always explain it like you're everybody else is here. When you read, you're just kind of here. It's just kind of like your consciousness is just a little bit shifted, and then you're in that reading mode.
That's kind of like when I see lifetimes. It's like I'm not really fully aware that I'm doing it.
Right.
Until we're having a discussion after, and then it's like, oh yeah, I saw that and saw that and saw that.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not even I'm consciously saying, okay, I'm going to go to this farm and I'm going to see this. It's just it's imagination, and that's what it is. You can imagine it, you can do it, and that's what Spirit always says.
I think it is. I think it's very true. And just here on this plane, it's just slow. It just it takes time, and it takes a different type of movement. But we're used. I think we are all impatient because we're used to that other plane of existence where things are just instantly the way that we, and I think here it's like it's so dense and so different that I think we all get impatient because it's like, hey, why isn't that thing over here like I want it to or whatever?
I mean, even entities that, that sometimes end up being guides, they acknowledge that there's some of them that have been human, and they're just like, sometimes they forget what it's like to be here if they've been here before. So what you said is just confirmed that everywhere else we think something and it appears, and that's a lot of times why we're so impatient, is it's part of our contract and it takes forever for things to come. And I will say, I will go back to my mom. She actually went to a future lifetime, which is the only time that's ever happened to me, strangely enough. The reason was not to visit a life, but to acknowledge she can do time traveling and everything, but that's a whole other story.
Oh, wow.
But she's a healer, but the awareness of Dolores's work and all this is not within her wheelhouse. And she was in a life where she would think herself somewhere. She would think the home, kind of the structure she stayed in. She was really confused because she said, I feel like I'm myself, but I'm also the house, and I don't understand that. And so it was like, it's true. Everywhere else, we think something into existence. I even took her inside that structure and I said, what do you see? And she said, there's nothing. And I said, why? And she said, I just think what I need, it comes into being, and then when I'm done with it, it just disappears. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, wouldn't that be great?
So it was really cool because it confirmed.
Right.
That's why we're impatient, because we can't do that.
Yes. And I feel it all the time, because I always think about almost everything that I've over, a lifetime that I've tried to manifest, or I've taken time to, I really, really would like this. Eventually it does happen. It just takes time. And it also, you need to be kind of open to the ways it can come in too. Because I think sometimes we get tunnel visioned as this is the only way I can find this job, is to go on, a website or whatever. But if we kind of open up and just let it come in, let it happen any way that it can, I think that's the way to do it.
And I think Spirit and guides get so frustrated with that, because we do get so blinded.
Yes.
And they're throwing stuff at us all the time.
Yes.
And then sometimes like literally smacking us over the head in some form or another. And, people are like, why aren't they helping me? Why isn't this happening? And then, if they have a session, it's like, we can't do anything else without rolling her over with a train. She just has to look. She's not looking. So it's even with like family members who, are with people and do things all the time around the house or whatever else. And it's like, they're like, she's just not seeing it. I'm doing all this stuff. She just so bad over me passing that she's not looking around, and I'm doing all this stuff and she's not seeing me. And so, it's just being open and receptive to ways that Spirit plays in our life here and what we manifest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have loved this conversation.
Yeah.
Jason. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting, and let people know what you do and where they can find you as well.
My website is jasonqhht.com. I do psychic readings. I do mediumship readings, QHHT. In its pure sense, is done in person, so that does have to be in one-on-one. Spiritual counseling. I also do something called psychic soul body wellness. That's working with my abilities alongside focusing specifically on physical symptoms and understanding those messages in terms of present lifetime, also if it could be generational or past lifetime trauma that needs to be released. So it doesn't require hypnosis. It's just I have abilities in seeing patterns and different things like that. I won't explain that at all, but it can be very healing and therapeutic. I do that online, and then also the group and individual online regressions are just a lighter form of trance. And Dolores, it's actually Dolores' method too. She used with groups, so I do a lot.
You do a lot, yeah. You absolutely do. I put all of Jason's information in the description below, and thank you, Jason, for coming on. And I will see you guys on Thursday Night Live, and I'll see you next Sunday, and we'll talk again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.